This is my wrap-up video for the month of October, and first on the list, City of Angels by Sherilyn Pratt. This is the first book in the Ray Jensen series about a private investigator. It's also written by an LDS author, and this book gets extra bonus points for not being too preachy for being an LDS author. I know that with LDS and with Christian authors, that's a big pet peeve of mine, is they are much too preachy, and this one focuses a lot more on the story. It's still a little preachy, but it's the kind of preachy that I didn't have as much of a problem with. This book gets 4 stars. I apologize if it's really dark over here. I'm pretty sure you guys can at least see most of me and my surroundings, but my light did go out that shines in this area of the room, and I haven't changed it yet. So, I read Goblin Secrets by William Alexander. I have been reading this book with one of my nephews. We have been reading it together, and I have been doing videos of reading the chapter to him because he lives like 8 hours away, and so this is the way that I get to read a book with one of my nephews, and it's really awesome. And the book itself is actually really awesome. I had never heard of this before, never heard of this author before, and that's completely insane because this book is brilliant. I give it 5 stars. The world is amazing. It's a fantasy. It's got stuff about theater, stuff about masks, magic, people who have gear-worked legs. There is just tons of awesome stuff in this book, and I can't believe that I'd never heard of this before. So, Goblin Secrets, guys. This one's good. The Wonder of All Things by Jason Mott. Now, I really like Jason Mott. I read this book and The Returned, which is his only 2 books as far as I know. And I really enjoy his style. I really enjoy the stories that he has to tell, and I love the way he writes them. And so I loved The Returned. I think I gave it 5 stars, but I don't remember. This book, I didn't like it as much. I still liked it, but I didn't like it as much, and I think most of this had to do with the ending. The ending made sense for the story, and it's not that it was a bad ending or anything, it's just not the ending that I wanted, and so, yeah, that's the reason why I didn't like this as much as The Returned. But this book still gets 4 stars. I would still recommend it to people. It's about a girl who's 13, and after an accident, she finds out that she can heal people. And just all of the crazy stuff that follows after that video goes viral on the internet. And it's an interesting story, and I love the way that Jason Mott looks at people and looks at the way that people react to impossible situations. And that's what I really love about Jason Mott's style. So this book gets 4 stars, and I would definitely recommend starting with The Returns just because it was my personal favorite. But this book is also good, and I am very much looking forward to his next one. The Hunchback Assignments by Arthur Slade. I am rereading this book, and 5 stars, of course. You can check out the review that I did on this book a while back, but it gets 5 stars. It's brilliant. It's amazing. I have no idea why Arthur Slade is not a household name, especially for book readers, because he has created a really fascinating world in Victorian London about spies that it's just heaped with literary allusions. I mean, the main character is a disfigured hunchback named Modo. One of the villains is a doctor named Cornelius Hyde, who makes a picture that brings out the beast in people. Are you guys, catching what I'm throwing out here at you? Literary allusions used to create entirely new, different stories. So if you have ever read a classic and loved it, this book, right here, and the best news is there's 4 of them, and a graphic novel. Beneath the Sands of Egypt, Adventures of an Unconventional Archaeologist by Donald P. Ryan, PhD. This was a pretty interesting book. Basically the memoirs of an archaeologist, go figure. I did not find anything very unconventional about this guy, and maybe that's just because I don't know enough about archaeology, but he seemed, I don't know, like your regular archaeologist. So I was hoping for something a little more eccentric. My favorite chapter in this book was towards the end, and it's actually the chapter that's all about Ryan's relationship with Thor Heyerdahl, who, if you don't know, is responsible for the Kon-Tiki voyage and the book. He wrote the book Kon-Tiki. He set sail on a raft across the Pacific Ocean to see if early peoples could have traveled across the Pacific by raft, by the boats that they could build with their technology. And I read Kon-Tiki several years ago, and it was really, really fascinating. fascinating. And so Thor Heyerdahl, to me, is a very interesting person. And there was a whole chapter in here because Donald P. Ryan actually knew him, and he worked with him for a long time. And so that was the most interesting to me. If you're interested at all about archaeology or Egyptology, this is a good read. I only gave it 3 stars. Just because, like I said, it wasn't unconventional. It wasn't really what I was expecting. There was an entire chapter in here about rope, which, yeah, not really my cup of tea. But I totally get what he's saying, because his point is that a lot of aspects of archaeology and study of ancient civilizations is overlooked because it's not romantic or adventurous, or things like this. And he happens to be a mountain climber, and so rope is something that he knows, so he started looking at rope from ancient civilizations, and so there's an entire chapter in here about ancient rope. 3 stars, Donald P. Ryan. Kind of an interesting read. The Arithmetist by Brandon Sanderson. Okay, so this is my 3rd Brandon Sanderson book that I have read. The first one was Steelheart, the second one was Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, and so I've only read his young adult stuff. I haven't read any of his adult fantasy yet. I'm kind of bracing myself because they're all like that thick. I have a friend who loves reading Brandon Sanderson, and he is very fond of saying that a chapter in a Brandon Sanderson novel is the size of an entire novel by someone else. So I am kind of hesitating to pick up one of his fantasy novels. But in the meantime, I have his wonderful young adult stuff, like The Arithmetist. This was a brilliant book. The world, the concept, the magic that they use, math and geometry has become magic. The villains in this book are petroglyphs, like the drawings that the Native Americans drew in caves and things like this. Petroglyphs and cave drawings. These are the villains. They are alive and they can like devour people, and it was kind of really creepy, but this is a wonderful book. Great characters, amazing world building. I'm kind of jealous with how well Brandon Sanderson can do the world building. So for a girl who like abhors math, who absolutely loved this book where they turned math into magic, that's huge. So this is 5 stars. The narrator was also very good, so I would recommend the audiobook. No problem recommending that. Guardians of the Galaxy Prelude. So this is a graphic novel that Marvel came out with before the release of the movie Guardians of the Galaxy to get everybody familiar with the characters. And so the first one is a comic about, can I say comic, or is that not what they're called anymore? Maybe they're like graphic novella. Anyway, the first story is about Nebula. So that was really interesting because everybody wants to know more about Nebula. And the second story was about Rocket and Groot. And I think those two were specifically written for this anthology to introduce these characters that were coming into the film, as well as the next story, which was about Gamora. And then they get into some of the classic comics. And by classics, I'm pretty sure that most of these were written in the 80s. And the 80s, let's just say the golden age of comics, the 80s was not. A lot of these comics were very, very strange. Let's just say I'm very glad most of these characters got updated. So, I think I give this one 3 stars, just because some of these stories were really bizarre, and I honestly can't believe that I read the whole thing, that I read all of them, because I was sitting there at one point, and I was reading the one where Hulk goes to the crazy animal world where Rocket is, and I was just like, this is really kind of very painful. And I mean, there were clowns on rockets, and it's just kind of, yeah, I don't know, it was weird. It was weird. And then there was one about Groot, and Groot was like a villain, and he was trying to take over this village and this world, and I don't know. They weren't the greatest stories, I don't think, and like I said, the 80s, not the golden age of comics. I think they were struggling with those. So yeah, Prelude only gets 3 stars, and I don't really know that I would recommend it to anybody. I mean, if you're interested in seeing like where the characters originally came from, it definitely has like the original appearances of Gamora, Rocket, and Drax the Destroyer, who I liked so much better in the movie, mostly because he takes everything so literally. I love that about him so much. Hey, you know what? I've got one more right here. Catch Me If You Can by Frank W. Abagnale with Stan Redden. I saw this movie years and years and years ago and thought that it was like really fun and fascinating. And this is basically the true story of a real fake. This is about a con man who was huge into check fraud. This is the story of a con man who pretended to be an airline pilot, a supervisor at a hospital, and a professor of, what was it, sociology or psychology? I'm pretty sure it was sociology. And so this was really interesting. I didn't find out until later that the audiobook is actually abridged, but it says it's approved by the author, so I guess that's okay. This was a very fun and interesting story. I would recommend reading it and then seeing the movie, because I remember the movie being very fun, and it was quite different than the book, which, you know, doesn't totally surprise me. Kind of like the Monuments Men book versus the movie. Way different. Okay, so I hope this isn't too dark for you to see, and you guys all have a wonderful November. Especially for those of you doing NaNoWriMo. Good luck!